Welcome to our channel. In this episode, we will continue with the moon landing conspiracies. If you missed the previous episode, I recommend you watch it on my YouTube channel. Alright, without further ado, let's begin this episode. This particular photograph is quite iconic. It appears that one can immediately notice two light sources in the scene, resulting in shadows cast in different directions. However, logically speaking, there was only one light source on the moon at that time, the sun. Under intense sunlight, it would be impossible to have shadows cast in different directions. Just like on Earth, shadows should be parallel. But in the moon landing photos, there seem to be many instances where the shadows are not parallel. There is even an extreme photograph where two light sources create shadows at a 90-degree angle. Although some experts have explained that this phenomenon is due to multiple light sources caused by reflections from the lunar module, spacesuits, and reflections from Earth in the lunar environment. But this particular photograph of descending from the lunar module seems difficult to explain. There are clear signs of fill lighting outside the shadow. If it were a reflection from the lunar module, the fill lighting should appear on the opposite side instead. Upon closer examination of this moon landing photograph, what is the reflection on the astronaut's visor? Doesn't the neat row of reflections resemble studio lighting? And in this particular image, doesn't the blurry reflection outline something similar? Continuing to look further, there are various instances of exposed shots. And in this photograph, there is a clear letter, C, on the rock. Could this be a forgotten prop left behind? There is also a stark contrast between the foreground and background in this photograph. The foreground appears rough, while the background is smooth and mirror-like. Could this be a special effect created by a backdrop? Logically speaking, the background should be several kilometers away from the shooting point, even with a single light source like the sun. Even if the sunlight is strong, after exposure, the background should be slightly darker than the foreground. Continuing to examine this photograph, isn't the boundary between the foreground and background in a backdrop scenario even more apparent? Why is the ground so rough up close, but in the distance, it becomes a perfectly smooth and glossy surface? And so on. There are many more of these eerie photographs with various anomalies. One of the most discussed questions regarding moon landing photos is why there are no stars visible. Even when standing on Earth, with our thick atmospheric cover, we can see countless stars when we gaze at the night sky. However, the moon lacks an atmosphere, so one would expect a brilliant display of starlight. Yet, in the photos, not a single star is visible. There are generally two types of explanations for this. One explanation suggests that the majority of moon landing photos were taken during the lunar daytime, which would account for the absence of stars. The second explanation, as seen in this particular photograph, is that the astronauts were directly facing the sunlight while taking the picture. It can be observed that in order to properly capture the foreground, the distant sun becomes overexposed. This indicates that the sunlight on the moon is very intense, requiring the camera to be used in a high-intensity mode, resulting in a small aperture for nearby bright objects. Consequently, the background appears pitch black, and the faint light of stars cannot be captured by the camera. Of course, there are also enthusiasts who have presented a video clip like this one. This is a scientific and educational film released by NASA during the Apollo program. It specifically explains how to adjust the spacecraft's attitude and establish its position in orbit. The astronauts used sextants to observe the stars to confirm their own attitude and orientation. So, what does this mean? It means that throughout the spaceflight, the astronauts, like ancient sailors, had to rely on stars for navigation. If stars were so important, then it is logical to assume that they would also have to monitor the stars and determine their positions on the moon. However, despite the significance of the stars, why the astronauts didn't capture a single image of the starry sky? From Apollo 11 in 1969 to Apollo 17 in 1972. The 12 astronauts spent a total of 80 hours on the lunar surface, traveled hundreds of kilometers in lunar rovers, and took thousands of photos. It does seem unreasonable that not a single image of the night sky was taken. So, why is that? Take a close look at this photograph. Why is the lunar module's landing gear pristine and even shining? Keep in mind that the thrust during the landing of the entire lunar module was 4,500 kilograms, even though there is no atmospheric resistance on the moon. The dust kicked up by such tremendous thrust should have been extremely intense. However, once this dust settled, not a single speck can be seen on the lunar module's landing gear. The entire lunar module appears remarkably clean. This seems difficult to explain. In various scenes, whether in the distance or up close, everything looks equally clean and pristine. Enthusiasts have raised a sharp question. In the footage of the lunar module taking off from the moon, why is its ascent so slow, as if it is being lifted by a crane? At the same time, the most crucial point is, who filmed this footage? If we assume that the footage was captured by a camera left on the lunar surface, then how were the developed film negatives transmitted back to Earth? Even if the United States had the wireless digital transmission technology available at the time, there is another question. Take a careful look at this filming lens. It can automatically focus, tilt, and zoom. Could it be operated remotely by the astronauts inside the return module? In any case, these footage from the return module are too peculiar. The only reasonable explanation is that the United States had filming equipment similar to today's technology, capable of autofocus, wireless transmission, and functioning in the extreme lunar temperatures ranging from -153 degrees Celsius to +107 degrees Celsius. Continuing on, enthusiasts have presented some videos where the way astronauts stand up appears peculiar. While we understand that this may be due to the moon's gravity being only 1/6 of Earth's, when enthusiasts compare these scenes with wire suspension effects, it can send a shiver down your spine. Enthusiasts have even highlighted the remnants of wires in these lunar videos. There are many such videos, including instances where the flag appears to be fluttering, which is a continuity error. Since there is no atmosphere on the moon, what is the source of the force that causes the flag to move when passing through the camera frame? There have even been exhibitions showcasing the Apollo 11 spacesuit's boot sole, which looks completely different from the footprints Armstrong left on the lunar surface. The time has come for this episode, and we will continue the discussion on the moon landing conspiracies in next episode.